coaches, can you talk about where it is that you learned your offensive and defensive philosophies? You were just telling me a story about Adolph Rupp, right? At the different clinics and camps and other coaches. Maybe just talk about that a little bit. Where is it you learned that?
Well, I think probably, there used to be a kind of Scholastic Coach magazine used to come out once a month, you remember that? And there was always something in there about you could take an ad to your program, but I made it a point, and my family went along with me, that I went to a coaching clinic every summer.
Okay.
And the year was over, I'd done my summer work, and then I'd work in a basketball camp, like I worked 15 years in Eau Claire, and I'd leave right from the camp and come home. And we went to Paducah, Kentucky 4 years, and coaches from all different parts of the country would come there. Went to the Kansas State Coaches Association and others, but do something different than all the coaches that would go to the clinic here in Minneapolis to be doing. Mm-hmm. And what do you do? And I sit together and pick their brain. What do you do? We got a big kid or a kid that needs this help, and then what do you do? Mm-hmm. And just.
Yeah, that's great. Jeff?
I think the different offenses and defenses that you use, you steal from other coaches, and I think I love watching college basketball. I think whenever I watch the games, I like to be in the room by myself and listen to the announcers. I've got a clipboard with notepad, and I jot stuff down all the time. Mm-hmm. And every game, I end the season, I got a whole clipboard full of stuff, and look at things that maybe you could use with personnel you have coming back the next year. Go to clinics, and for about 9 years I worked for Clem Haskins at the University of Minnesota, working his camps, and I didn't work those camps for the pay because he didn't pay much, but you spent 10, 11 hours a day with coaches from, as he mentioned, from Kentucky, all over the country coming in to work his camps, and you sit around at lunch, you sit around at dinner, and you just throw ideas back and forth. There's different concepts and stuff, and I learned a lot from those and ended up writing some of those coaches. Bobby Cook from Campbellsville, Kentucky, some of those guys, and you get ideas from them. Mm-hmm. What's working, what are they doing down there, something they're trying, and I think you're always learning and you're always stealing too.
Yeah. Well, in hindsight, we were always incredibly prepared with scouting reports, other teams' players and tendencies, what we did in practice, drilling, fundamentals, offensive, defensive schemes. And what I'm curious about is when we were sophomores, Jeff implemented a number of the drills and offensive and defensive strategies, plays that we would use as juniors and seniors. Was that always the plan? And what was the communication like between you two when you were the sophomore coach?
I don't think there ever was any original game plan. He always told me you can do what you want, and I think that's kind of a philosophy I stay with too. Is all of our youth programs, every year I had some of our youth coaches asking us, what offense do you want us to work on? Well, what may be good for the kids we have as seniors may not be very suitable for youth. And I think that takes some of the creativity away from coaching. Let the guys, youth coaches, do what they want to do. That's what he let me do. But you remember when you were playing as a junior and senior, I was coaching the sophomores. I went through every varsity practice. So I was going through 2 practices back to back for 11 years. And so I watched what they were doing a lot of times and just thought this group may continue on and do that when they're juniors and seniors. So I brought a lot of stuff they were doing in practice to our practices. That wasn't by any design at all. Just I thought maybe
it helps a carryover too when they become junior.
Oh yeah, for sure. Coach, did you watch the sophomore team at all and know about like players that are going to be coming up, or were you mainly focused on your varsity and the JV players?
No, in fact, how many years did I keep the book for the sophomores?
Okay.
and so I'd watch them play.
The home games, yeah.
Home games, yeah. No, I'd be very much aware of what was coming up and what needed to be done. But I did, and I mentioned I met with a couple of coaches that I started out with years ago. And Whitey Johnson and I went to, Whitey's from Eau Claire. He'd been coach at Armstrong and Cooper. And we went to Eau Claire basketball camp. And they didn't have one in Minnesota yet. Mm-hmm. So I went there 15 years. I took Jeff over a couple of years. And they were allowed to do that. And he'd probably get 1,300 kids from Wisconsin or Illinois or whatever states around. And we just looked at all the drills they were doing. And they had, his college players were working the camps as counselors. And there were some good ones. They had a couple went on and played in the NBA and good college players. And so they had fun. And they always, and then the coaches we had coaches from Illinois, we had from Michigan, we had, and then they had a featured guy come every year. McGuire would come
Oh, yeah.
a lot.
Okay.
And we just, after practices night, we sit down and just kind of pick each other's brains of what to do and what do you do here, what do you do there, and so.
That's
Just
great.
learning. Well, then I came back, and how many years, what's the basketball camp that for you this year?
The what?
Your basketball camp?
43rd year.
43.
Wow.
So I started it, and he's continued it. So, and then, we always thought basketball was much better in Wisconsin because we could see what they're doing. But it didn't take 2 or 3 years maybe until they opened up the camps and the summer leagues and games. And not necessarily AAU, but opened up to play more, and we caught up, Minnesota caught up in a hurry. And I think Minnesota's a pretty good recruited state right now.
Yeah, for sure. I'd like to talk about being a head coach and what it is like sitting in that head coach's seat and how that's different than being an assistant coach. Can you?
Were you ever an assistant?
At the college in Superior, yeah.
It's a long time ago.
Well, and they're there for watching the game, you know what we're doing, contribute anything, you know, that you're not there just to get a good view. You know, you see something, bring it on. And you trust them enough that they have a background and that they're that have more eyes looking at situations, individuals and that, and maybe there's someone you want them to watch this guy, what he's doing.
Jeff, how's it different sitting in that chair?
Well, I think when you're the head coach, everything, good or bad, comes down on you. So first and foremost, you got to surround yourself with good people. And I've had Jimmy Williams with me since day one. And I think when I first took the job, I thought I had to do everything. I was watching, my kids were small, and I was waiting for them to get done watching their shows on their VCR so I could put in game tapes and stuff. And Stan Shea gave me some advice. He said, give your assistant coaches a lot of freedom or a lot of responsibilities, and they'll work harder for you. They'll appreciate that, and they'll work harder for you. I think Jimmy's done our defense now the last, and he watches all of our game film, breaks that down, and I haven't had to do that. I watch it, but he does all that prep for us now, and I think he's just kind of, he and I are co-coaches, and I think that's just kind of excited him more about being a coach as opposed to just being an assistant coach.
How has your coaching philosophy evolved from when you first, this is for both of you, for when you first started, so in 1970 to 96, how did that evolve, and then same thing for
Well,
you?
I think it's just like teaching. How much has things changed when you first started teaching? How do you deal with kids, and what's the philosophy of this, that, and how much do you let them do what they want to do, or do you try to channel them in one way or another? And you just gotta go with the times a little bit. I think I feel I've changed. I started coaching in 1959, and I'm a heck of a lot different now than I did then. I would have, but you change with something new and different, and the kids are getting better every year. You got to take advantage of them and give them an opportunity.
Jeff, how did
you-
have you evolved?
Well, I think the game changes year after year after year, but I always said that the number one reason why these kids are playing fun why they're playing basketball is to have fun. And if that ever gets in the way of what we're doing, then we need to reevaluate what we're doing. I think the kids, we work hard, but I think the kids will say at the end of the day that, it was fun. It was a lot of work, but it was fun. And as far as offensive and defensive philosophies, they change year to year. And look at the college game. Every year they're implementing new different types of offenses, and they steal from the NBA and so forth, and the NBA steals from over in Europe, and the game just changes.
How about kids? Do the players change? I mean, from the 70s to present day?
Yes, they do.
They do change.
I'll go back to the very first year I was teaching. We had a get-together of all the old teachers and new teachers together at the local supper club and so forth. The oldest guy on the faculty came up and said, "I tell you what, kid," he said, "I'm sure God, this is my last year. I couldn't take another year with kids." And you got to be able to.
And that's in 1970 you said that?
1959.
Or 1959, okay.
You got to be able to change with times and the way kids are today and what they're going through, rather than, and your way of coaching has got to change. So,
Jeff, you think there's a big difference between, say, 70s and today and
Yeah, but I don't think
players?
it's always necessarily just the kids. I think the parents have changed a little bit.
Oh,
And because
okay.
the parents have changed, maybe the kids have changed a little bit. I think sense of entitlement, I think, with some kids. And I always tell our kids when they come into our program that the kids don't even know. I say, I know something about your basketball that you don't know and your parents don't even know about you. And they, what is that? Well, that's how hard you can work. Because those kids have only worked as hard as they ever want to. And they don't know how hard they actually can work when pushed. And it's that sense of entitlement, I think, that is kind of filtered down through all different type of sports. I think maybe parents have let that happen a little bit.
Yeah, okay. I'd like to talk about the 90s teams. So coaches from 1990 to 1995, and coach, your 1990 team was your last state tournament team. They were 23-3. The star player on that team was Mike Vandegaard, who's now an NBA scout. Brent Irvin, John Carter, Dave Cicchini. Do you remember that season? And then what I'd like to do is then ask you your recollections, Jeff, about the season. So do you remember that season?
well, once again, I think if you go back and look at all of our teams, we had pretty good leadership. Our captains were good, and they had good leadership there. And they were a hard-working group. And the end result of that year probably changed an awful lot. The very first state tournament game there when Mike Vandegaard sprained an ankle.
Okay.
And we we had an excellent trainer, Kelly Flynn, and she spent the whole night and the next night with him, and we ended up playing consolation final. They won that, but he had an ugliest-looking ankle, and I don't know how he ran on it, but.
And you lost to, was it Fergus Falls?
Fergus Falls,
Fergus
right.
Falls,
And well, easy to say after that, I think we could have won, but because Mike was the Metro Player of the
Yeah,
Year
right.
that year. And the rest of them were not slouches either. They
Yeah.
were very good, and they worked together very well.
Right.
And you mentioned the names previously. And that, we were kind of the team of the 80s, I think.
Oh, for sure. And looking through
Yeah.
looking through the books.
And
Yeah.
each year, we won maybe 1-2 guys coming back, something like that. Just the fact that people wanted to improve themselves.
Yeah.
I talked a little bit earlier about improving 1% per day, and from like mid-February on, and they worked with that philosophy
Yeah.
pretty well.
Yeah. Jeff, what do you remember
Well,
about?
that team, he and I, Mike Vandegaard's nephew, Tyler Riemersma, played for us last year. And we had a lot of talk about that 90, is it 90 or 91? What year is that? 90?
90.
That 90 team,
90,
some of
yeah.
those players. And I think you wrote a letter to the State High School League about those kids. One of them's a doctor. One of them runs a major business over in China. But I think those kids were,
Yeah.
how many kids had? Oh, was it?
Well, really, top 6 were all, and I took their ACT scores. I wrote to the high school league in the paper and wrote a personal letter to all of them. And they were very, very, very sharp, and
Yeah.
every one of them were very successful.
Well, Dave Cicchini, he's a head football coach
Right.
at a college presently.
But I think they all were stars in the classroom
Yeah,
as well.
that's great.
And that's, there's a lot of connection between being good in the classroom, having success in athletics. And that certainly was.
That's what I wrote the high school league for, because there's too much of talking the other way around where they don't, all they do is play, but
So that was the 1990 team. In 1991, you guys are 13-9. Brad Markwell is going to be a sophomore that year, and I just wrote some names down of players: Brett Mitchell, Matt Vollum, Mike Zender, Ian Carlson. Was it difficult coming off state tournament teams where you'd had, a lot of success? You were 13-9, which is still, a good record. Was that difficult going into the season, knowing that maybe you weren't as talented as the previous year?
No, you just tell yourself you got to roll up your sleeves. You're going to work a little bit harder and to get the production. And if the talent was there, it's up to you to get it out of them. And you mentioned some names there of some names that ring a bell with me that were very, very hard workers.
Yeah.
And maybe they overachieved, I don't know.
Okay.
But
Okay.
we're very pleased with all of
Okay.
them.
Jeff, 1991.
Well, those groups that came off after a state tournament team, they realized the year before they got to practice against that state tournament team every year. So they had the benefit of playing against a state tournament caliber team, and that really promotes their growth.
Was it always the plan to have the varsity team practice against the JV team where they were always, like one unit together? Or did you ever think about doing it where it was JV was completely separate from the varsity?
I never did. No, unfortunately, we had some good JV players which pushed the varsity group too.
Right.
And when you look back at the years we had, then Lingenfelder group, they had a great JV group that pushed them all year, and they came back. They were 27-0. They had tough practices.
Yeah.
The places that I've coached it, I didn't know that it was ever done any other way different than that.
Right.
So that's just what I thought.
Sure.
The model was there, and it's been pretty successful.
Yeah.
So keep on doing that.
1992. 16-6. It's your last conference championship. The seniors are Jeff Eckerly, Sean Kelly, Adam Mickelson. Brad Markwell's a junior. You're upset at home in the first round. I was a sophomore that was in the stands, and I was devastated. Do you remember that 1992 last conference championship team?
Yeah, so I think the loss was to Cooper.
Yeah, that's right.
An afternoon, Saturday afternoon
Yeah,
game.
it was.
And we were, I don't know, what do you do? We were a much better team than that. But they shot very well.
Yeah.
But they all played us. And our kids had never, ever had that happen to them before. And so
Okay.
it was, you had to go back to the drawing board and search the next
Right.
year. What did you do right?
Because you
missed
were
it.
probably the 1 seed, if I
Yes, we
remember
were.
correctly.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think Cooper ended up going to the section championship that year.
Did they?
I think they did, and they knocked off a couple other teams. It's just a team that just, either they got healthy at the right time of the year or just got extremely lucky and good at
Yeah.
the right time of the year. But I think they went to the section championship. I think they lost in like a double or triple overtime. It's years ago,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
that's the funny thing about high school sports, though.
Sure.
The team that's supposed to win on paper doesn't always win. You're dealing with 16, 17, 18-year-old
Yeah.
kids. That's the beauty of it. You got a chance every game you're going in, because these are not professional athletes. These are high school kids.
Yeah. Well, and as a sophomore, one of the things that I enjoyed is you got to ride the bus home with the varsity team, and so you watched all of those games, and I remember that actually quite well.